This is your host of CivilNet, Eric Hacopian, and we are honored to be joined by Pierre Terzian, the president of Petrostrategies, a Paris-based energy consulting group. He's one of the foremost experts on the energy and oil industry. Thank you, Mr. Terzian, for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'm going to start my interview with you. Obviously, Azerbaijan and oil are synonymous, and one of the factors which was very noticeable is that there seems to be a direct correlation between low oil prices and war. In 2016, when the last time when the Azeri armies attacked Artsakh, you had multiple devaluations, and the world oil price was at a very low point, and Azerbaijan was hurting economically. And in 2020, when we were attacked by the Azeris and their ISIS-like jihadi friends, we have the same kind of situation with the COVID crisis and the low oil prices. Can you speak about this correlation, and am I seeing something that's there, or is it just a coincidence?
You're right. Oil is the pillar of Azerbaijan political and economic power. And when something important happens to oil, the whole policy of Azerbaijan is shaken. We knew for a long time now that reserves in Azerbaijan are depleting, production is coming down, and time is running out. They had to find some sort of solution to the Karabakh issue, to the Artsakh issue, because they knew that in a matter of years, they could not have the same oil revenue level and lose, therefore, their political negotiating main card. Now, when in March 2020, oil prices collapsed, and suddenly everyone realized that peak oil was approaching, and then the end of oil was approaching, although it will take a long time still. This factor became an accelerator that brought us to this war, because suddenly Azerbaijan realized that time is even shorter than what they had in mind. Then came the Turkish factor. Then came the Turkish agenda. And the meeting of these two agendas, the Azerbaijani agenda and the Turkish agenda, brought to war. What was the Turkish agenda? The Turkish agenda is one of failures. The biggest failure, recent one, was in the Mediterranean. Turkey launched a huge diplomatic and military maneuver in the Mediterranean, especially in the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and failed to get any result. On the contrary, as opposition to Turkey's policy, two coalition groups were created, one led by France during a meeting in Corsica, Ajaccio, with the Southern European countries. This was a political coalition against Turkey, saying stop, don't go beyond that. And the second one was created in Cairo, Egypt, which was an energetic coalition, bringing together 6 countries: Israel, Egypt, Italy, Greece, Cyprus, and Jordan. And again, the message was to Turkey, stop, don't go beyond this line. Now, it was important for Turkey to open a new era of negotiations, mainly with Russia, because Turkey is deadlocked in Syria because of Russia, and in Libya because of Russia. Now, opening a new front with Russia, a negotiating front, became part of the Turkish agenda. And this is why this war is part of the Turkish agenda. And this explains why Turkey is so much involved. Suddenly, Turkey now is on the southern borders of Russia immediately, present with its officers and armaments, but also through jihadists, which is a big problem for Russia because of these southern Russian Muslim populated provinces. So the meeting of these two agendas brought us to this war. Otherwise, the war could happen next year or in 2022.
Okay, thank you for that insightful reading of the current situation. I'm going to step back a little bit. I was I think it was a year and a half ago, I was reading something that was astounded me. And that is that for the longest time since the 1994 deal of the century was signed, Azerbaijan had the highest per capita income, followed by Georgia and Armenia. Azerbaijan being the richest country in the Caucasus per capita, Armenia being the poorest. But in 2019, Georgia passed Azerbaijan in per capita income. And prior to this COVID disaster that hit the world, Armenia was supposed to pass per capita income of Azerbaijan's in 2020, which could have very well happened because the oil economies have crashed more than other economies. And this is after almost $250 billion in income from this deal of the century. I mean, there's different ways to count that amount. How do you explain that? Or how does Aliyev explain that? That after all of those resources, his people are now the poorest people in the Caucasus?
Well, the explanation is a very simple one. Azerbaijan has only oil and a little bit of natural gas. That is the only production and almost only export of Azerbaijan. And all depends on the price of oil, because the price of gas is also related to the price of oil. Let me just give you one example. In 2018, the price of oil was above $70 per barrel. Azerbaijani income was very high, GDP was very high, and suddenly this year, the price of oil has collapsed. It's almost half that the price of 2018, and the whole Azeri economy is collapsing. And this year they will have $5 to $6 billion of oil revenues at most, compared to something like $15 to $17 billion revenues 2 years ago. Now, for a country like Azerbaijan, oil is important because it's the main source of revenue, and when revenues drop, the whole political system starts to collapse. And when we see that happening in Azerbaijan, and this is also one of the factors, one of the accelerators for Aliyev to take the decision of war, because time is running short. And Azeris have not developed any other economic substitute to oil. This is not a unique case. You have cases like that in other oil-producing countries in the world. For instance, if you take Nigeria, you can have the same examples, and other countries as well. So we call this the Dutch disease, monoproduction countries. So there is a kind of deadlock, political deadlock, economic deadlock, and the only solution for Aliyev is to show some results in the Artsakh problem. For them, it is a very important matter. If he fails, his power will be shaken. Maybe he can fall. And what means success for them? Success for them means taking territories back, what they call back. For us, we do not need territories. We just defend ourselves. But for them, it is very important to show to their population that we have done something. At the same time, you notice that there are these jihadists. Why jihadists? Because they don't want to have too many victims, Azeri victims. This is, again, a political calculation. This is the explanation for bringing in the jihadis, in addition to the Turkish agenda that gives a new negotiating card with Russia. Take into consideration the fact also that there are US elections in a month's time. And the present administration, the US administration, is rather favorable to Mr. Erdogan and his policy. But it will not be the same case if a democratic administration comes to power. So this is also one of the explanations of the timing of war.
Yeah, I think it's just to parlay on what you said. In fact, I think it became a scandal when in a New York Times editorial board meeting, Biden spoke openly about overthrowing Erdogan. And I'm going back on the war. I think that Aliyev he needs to have a significant victory. He cannot have factory villages, which I think, unfortunately, is what is likely to drag this war much longer than necessary. You had touched on the Mediterranean issues, and I have a question about that. Obviously, this is your world. Right now, we have very low gas prices. If you look at these oil and gas projects are humongous. They take forever to come to line. Many of these projects will not even come to line until the late 2020s or 2030. At a time when countries across, as different as the United States, Europe, Western Germany, and China, 2030 is like where you have all these mandates to move to electric cars. At the end of the day, is all of this Mediterranean gas intrigue by Erdogan, outside of not being successful, not even realistic, because you might have the gas, but it might never be worthwhile selling it, even if you get access to it. Is this something that's understood by them, or they really don't care about that? It's really about the perception of it.
Well, there are 2 points for gas, natural gas. One is Azerbaijan, and second is Turkey. For Azerbaijan, exporting gas was a kind of hope. They hoped that by exporting additional volumes of gas, they would compensate the fall in oil revenues that will happen and started to happen. Unfortunately for them, there is a surplus of gas in the international market, and the price has collapsed. Now, the Shah Deniz second project, which is now being completed, it was a huge investment, an investment of $40 billion that required a price of oil equivalent of at least $60 so that the Azeris can make any benefit out of this gas. We are very far from this price level. So Azeris are exporting their gas to Turkey, and they will start exporting the gas in a few weeks to Europe, Italy, without making any profit. On the contrary, they are losing money. Now,
is the TANAP line, the TANAP TANAP, the one that goes through Greece?
I did not understand your question.
This latest line, this latest gas line that you're saying is come online. This is called, I think, the TANAP TANAP that goes through Greece, correct? Am I in Southern Europe? Are we talking about the same gas line?
The voice is very bad. I can't understand your question.
Just continue what you're what you were referring to. I was just adding an extra question.
Okay. Now, regarding Turkey, Turkey wants to be a hub, a transit point for natural gas, and other East Mediterranean countries do not agree with this point. They do not want to depend on Turkey. Many of them have very bad relations with Turkey, political relations. So they started to try to find a new way to export their gas to Europe without passing through Turkey. And that was the East Med gas line project. which goes from Israel to Cyprus and then to Cyprus to Greece and then to the rest of the Europe without crossing Turkish waters. And that was one of the explanations for the Turkish intervention in Libya, because soon after this intervention, Turkey and Libya signed a new pact on water delimitations, on water borders, so that the EastMed gas line could not cross these waters without the agreement of Turkey. Now, this is a very simplistic way to think about this, because this EastMed pipeline project is not a short-time project. Nobody needs this gas line. Nobody needs the gas because of the surplus of supply. Second, because in Egypt, they have two huge liquefaction plants where they can take all the gas produced and to be produced in Cyprus and in Israel, liquefy it at low cost and export it to wherever they want at low cost without having to build a very expensive gas line to Greece and then the rest of Europe. So I think there too, Turkish analysis were a very bad analysis. And now we see, in fact, Cyprus and Israel negotiating with Egypt on liquefying their gas, processing their gas in Egypt, and exporting on LNG carriers without having to agree with Turkey or anybody else.
Mr. Terzian, this has been exceptionally informative, and I want to thank you for your time. I think we've touched on very important issues that are that have brought us to the unfortunate events of the last couple of days, but also have long-term implications. I really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.